Yo, what's up, guys? So the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck are two pretty different handhelds. But today we're going to be taking a look at two handhelds that are so similar that if you didn't tell me which one was which, I would have a hard time of distinguishing between these two. Today we're going to be taking a look at the AOKZOE A1 Pro, that's this one, and the original AOKZOE A1. So just to keep track of these two devices, the A1 Pro will always have the green RGB light and these gray thumbsticks, just so we can keep track of the two devices. So these devices are very similar on the outside, pretty much identical, but there are a few differences that I'm noticing just with my time with these devices. One thing that you will notice is that, of course, both of these devices have a large 8-inch display, but I am noticing that the A1 Pro is slightly brighter at peak brightness as well as slightly more saturated. Not sure how good this comes off over video, but if you can look here, you can slightly see that the brightness is slightly higher. It's almost indistinguishable, but if you look closely, you can tell that this one is slightly brighter, and you can definitely see that it is more saturated. This one seems more muted. The colors seem more quote unquote natural, and this one is more sort of like saturated and more lively and vivid. That is something that I am noticing between the two displays. Just so we can make sure we are getting our full 8 inches, I'm gonna measure this device here, the screen diagonal. Okay, so that's 8 inches, and that is also 8 inches. So we are getting our full 8 inches on these two screens, so we can't really complain there. They are both 8 inches. These devices pretty much have the same dimensions across the entire device. They have the same dimensions, but that's not really something that you would expect to be different, because it's pretty much the same body, just different internals. So the dimensions are the same, and everything on the outside is pretty much the same, except for the calibration of the displays. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same display, just slightly tweaked in the factory calibration. But anyway, that's pretty much all that I can say for the outside. Well, there is one more thing. I did notice that the actual the finish of the plastic is slightly more matte, to the touch, and also the way that it sort of looks. This one is a little bit more glossy, and of course I have been using this one for over 6 months now, but it did come from the factory with a little bit more glossy finish that does show fingerprints a little bit more. It's just a little bit more glossy texture. This one is a little bit more matte, and it feels a little bit it's hard to explain, but it feels more matte. If you know what that means, then you know what I mean. But it just feels more matte. It feels more not smooth, but it just has like a different like texture to the actual finish of the plastic. All of the buttons are pretty much the same. You wouldn't really expect anything different from the buttons. The joysticks are both Hall effect joysticks and triggers, so the triggers pretty much feel the same. The bumpers feel the same. So all of the external buttons and hardware pretty much feels the same. It's just that that screen is different on the outside. Now, as far as what's on the inside, the difference between these two devices is where sort of like the inside is where that gap sort of widens. Now, this is running the new AMD 7840U chip, and this is running the last generation AMD 6800 chip. So there's a sort of like a generation gap between these two devices, and this also has 64 gigabytes of RAM, and this has 16 gigabytes of RAM. I know before you start coming in the comments saying you don't need 64 gigabytes of RAM, I know if we're talking strictly about gaming, you definitely don't need 64 gigabytes of RAM, and that's overkill for gaming. But there are some PC tasks that benefit from having more RAM. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, just ask in the comments and we can talk about it. But anyway, this has 64 gigabytes of RAM. This has 16 gigabytes of RAM. This has 6 gigabytes of RAM dedicated for VRAM, and this has 12 gigabytes of RAM dedicated for VRAM. So twice the VRAM that's allocated between these two devices. You're not going to get twice the performance. We're going to talk about performance in this video. Stick around for that. You're not going to get twice the performance, but you do have just twice the VRAM allocated. So those games that need more VRAM, you have that here. But I will say that for the most part, your GPU, the iGPU, is going to max out before the RAM is pretty much maxed out. So that's just one thing to consider. But it is good just for, just to have that extra VRAM allocated, as well as having more RAM so the system can run smoothly if you're doing multiple tasks. But as a gaming device, I would say that the RAM really usually isn't the limiting factor, because you're not going to be like running a lot of crazy things on these devices. But if you are, you do have that added RAM at your disposal. So that's talking about the RAM and the internals. Let's talk about something that we can sort of distinguish between these two devices, and that's the performance. So let's just run a few benchmarks, a few performance tests, and then we'll get out of here and you guys can go about your day. So let's run those benchmarks. All right, so the first performance test that we're going to be running on these two devices is Returnal. They're both running at 1080p, low settings, FSR set to performance. So let's run the benchmark and see the results. Okay, so the results are in. The A1 Pro averaged 43 FPS and the A1 averaged 40 FPS. So in this test, we're getting around a 9% increase. So 3 frames on average on the A1 Pro. Not much. So it's not a huge difference. I will say that in actual gameplay, it is much smoother on the A1 Pro. But in this benchmark, we see around 9% increase in performance, and I would say that you're not going to see a huge leap in this particular game. In gameplay, it is smoother, but it's not like twice the performance. Anyway, let's hop into the next benchmark and check out their performance. Okay, so the next game we're going to test is Dirt 5. We're going to run the benchmark on each of these and see the difference in performance. And this Dirt 5 benchmark is running at 1200p low settings. So let's see how it does. Okay, the Dirt 5 results are in. We got an average of 85 FPS, minimum of 58, maximum of 104, low 1% of 69, and a low 0.1 of 62. So a very good results on Dirt 5. Let's check out the results of the AOKZOE A1 original. Okay, so the results are in for the AOKZOE A1 original. It got 59.9, so it barely hit 60, just about. A minimum of 56, maximum of 64, low 1% of 58, and a low 1.0 or 0.1 of 58. So a very consistent and smooth gaming, but much lower compared to the A1 Pro, which got an average of 85. This got an average of around 60. So that is a large gap in this game. Let's test one more game and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, so the last game we're going to benchmark for this particular test is Cyberpunk 2077, both running at low settings, 1200p. So let's run the benchmark and check out the results. Okay, so the results are in. The Cyberpunk 2077 benchmark. The A1 Pro averaged 48 FPS. I don't know if you can see that, but it averaged 48 FPS. And the original AOKZOE A1 averaged 40 FPS. So about 8 frames, which is in this test around 20%. So that should give you a sense of the difference between these two devices. You're going to get around 10 to 25% increase in performance depending on the game and the specific optimization and requirements of whatever you're playing. So now I guess the last thing to sort of address is it worth it? If you already have the A1 or another 6800U device, is it worth it to upgrade to the 7840U device? I guess worth really depends on who you ask. If you're able to, I guess, sell your 6800U device for a pretty good price, not sure you can now that the ROG Ally is out. Prices are pretty much going down. If you're able to sell it to sort of supplement If you're able to get like an early bird special, then I guess it's good to make the jump just to be more future proof and have a more smooth gameplay experience. But to be honest, if you already have a 6800U device, you should be more than happy with it for like another year or 2 or 3 or 4. Who knows? You can still definitely play all the games that you play on the new one, on the 6800U version. It just depends on if you're willing to sort of make that jump to get slightly more performance. Like I said, 10 to 20 or 25% increase in performance is up to you if you want to make that jump. So don't expect like twice the performance. Don't expect like if you're only getting 30 frames, then you get the new one, you get 60 frames. That's not going to happen. If you're getting, if you're getting like 45 frames, 50 frames, then you should see, 60 FPS. And for some people, that's worth it, just to get that boost in performance. That is something that you can do. But I will say, if you're already happy with your 6800U device, you don't necessarily have to get the 7840U. Maybe you can, take a sidestep and check out the ROG Ally, for $700. It lacks some features like, ports, and the SD card has been getting cooked lately. They should have put it on the bottom like every other handout, but that's a story for another day. My SD card is still holding up in my ROG Ally, but maybe you consider to make the jump from something like this to that. I wouldn't, if you're happy with something like the AOKZOE A1, you should be good to go. But the A1 Pro does show improvements in the ways that matter. Anyway, this video is long enough. Let me know in the comments below what you want to see, any other tests you want to see between these devices. I have some other devices. Check out the channel, leave a comment down below, like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. I don't know. If you want to see more Burly Average Dude content, smash the like button. All that good YouTube stuff. Leave a comment down below of what you want to see next. Be very specific, because I'm all out of ideas and I'm taking all of your ideas. So leave all of your ideas in the comments below, because I'm out of ideas. Let me know what you want to see next, and I'm going.